start task, that does not mean you are lazy. It does not mean you lack discipline. It does not mean you secretly do not care enough. It means your brain does not respond to internal commands. I'm about to teach you how to make it cooperate. So much productivity advice presumes you can wag your finger at your brain and say, do this now. That's the core lie I'm trying to dismantle. Because scientifically speaking, task initiation and motivation are two completely separate neurological processes. You can want to do something so bad and care about it and know how to do it and still spend 3 hours doom scrolling on threads. But the behemoth of task initiation requires its own method. Autism research, initiation is disproportionately impaired even when you are completely willing and capable. Fail because your brain cannot find an entry point. And for neurodivergent people, the right angle is the most important step. Most systems assume that starting a task is a decision. It's not. Starting a task is actually a state transition. In ADHD, the basal ganglia and the prefrontal cortex struggle to gate action without sufficient dopamine. So no matter how much you care, sometimes you just can't start. That's called inertia. At rest, your brain resists movement. In motion, it stays in motion. That means your motivation might only appear after you move. That's why starting feels so impossible. Continuing is completely fine. Most neurotypical advice pretty much ignores this and tells you to want it more. That's nonsense and it doesn't work. This is where embodied tasking comes in. Embodied tasking is the idea that tasks do not begin in the brain, but in the body or the environment or even the cues around you. You don't have to try and force yourself to feel ready when you design conditions where readiness is irrelevant. This is a practice of my concept of cue-based living. Cue-based living means you stop relying on internal pressure and start designing signals that tell your brain what happens next. Because neurodivergent brains respond better to external cues than internal self-talk. When you rely on internal commands, your system gets intensely overloaded. So the strategy is to externalize direction in order to lower cognitive load. Embodied tasking has two main parts: task staging and task costuming. The first one, task staging, is about designing the conditions of entry without regard of the task itself. We do this because our brain evaluates context before content. It's called predictive processing. So basically, if a location, object, or even a posture has been repeatedly paired with stress, your nervous system will flag it as a threat before you even consciously register the task. This is why sitting at the same desk you associate with failure can shut that shit down. But task staging interrupts the loop. In theater, the future is predicted exactly. You do not decide what comes next. And get a cue, and you do what the cue incites. Task staging is where you set the scene. Literally just set the ideal conditions of where the task could happen. So you open the laptop and you don't write anything. Or you take out your homework and you don't start yet. Or you decide to sit on the floor to avoid the anxiety associated with your desk. You just need to make it approachable. Most of the work of good ideas is done in the subconscious. That's why you have great ideas in the shower or on the toilet when you aren't focusing on anything and your default mode network is active. The best way to create ideas is to passively prime your brain with information about the task and then let your default mode network do the magic. The exact same is true for task initiation. If your senses perceive a threat or ambiguity, they shut down initiation. If you lower the threat, you have a clearer entry and therefore an easier start. Step 2, task costuming. This is who you are inside the task. There is strong evidence that role priming changes persistence and risk tolerance, which basically means when you seek out and adopt a new role, your brain gets rules to follow. You take that responsibility off of you and you yeet it onto the system. Task costuming is who you become inside the task. When you do a task as yourself, the brain evaluates you. That is dangerous. Role playing, it externalizes that pressure and it stops what is called self-referential processing. It tells your brain that it is not a catastrophic situation and you're just a character in a scene. This is why one of the cards literally says, pretend you're the world's worst intern. Play is absolutely outstanding at lowering nervous system threat, which in turn increases your cognitive flexibility. Another card prompt is, pretend you're an alien learning human rituals. The more unexpected the input, the more exciting the connections. Novelty always increases dopamine. ADHD brains do not initiate based on importance, they initiate based on income, interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, passion. That's what makes you care. Most adult tasks meet none of these. Each card also has information about executive dysfunction and the ways around it. Like curating your inner world like a museum is a great way to develop a more fascinating perception of reality. Or getting into creative flow actually dampens your inner critic. I'm not going to tell you to be disciplined because you're plenty disciplined and the grind culture is a crock of shit. I'm just going to give some directions on where to stand, who to become when getting it done, and how to actually start. Embodied tasking lives under a larger framework called cue-based living. Neurotypical people rely on internal timing, but we have to rely on external signals. The task is a cue, it no longer requires any decision making. Decision fatigue is real, and a lot of it can go away if your system decides for you. Most importantly, scenes actually end. You're stuck in one perpetual improv class. Embodied tasking builds entrances and exits. That's why it works. That's why I built the directive dysfunction cards around it. I'm releasing 500 additional cards and a last push to finish funding the next semester of my nonprofit program at the local middle school. I just posted 25 full cards for free on my Substack. I'm Laura Young, doing a PhD focused on neurodivergent creativity, and make tools for us that nobody else will. Leave your problems below, and I'll do my best.